Hello everybody, my name is Dylan aka Spaz33, and welcome back to more Game and Yap. That's not what I wanted to do. Now it has certainly been a minute since the last Game and Yap I posted on this channel, and if you're not a returning viewer to my content, then well, first of all, please subscribe, please subscribe, please subscribe, please subscribe, please subscribe. But also, if you're not a returning viewer of my content, then you might be unaware that I just took a 3-week break from content creation. Oh, and also I'm here on classic Star Wars Battlefront from 2004, because it's peak. And I will justify myself no further. This is offline, I'm not playing against anybody, mostly because there were no populated servers for me to actually play against real people on. Ouch. But anyways, I recently took a break for 3 weeks from content creation, or, I mean, I hesitate to call it a break, really. I was pulled away from content creation by some personal stuff that I won't go into super, intimate detail on. Also, I need to, like, what are the help? But I digress. I had to take a 3-week break from content creation to focus on some personal stuff, and that also brought me some inspiration for something new to Game and Yap about. And that particular thing would be the idea of taking things one day at a time, or I guess one step at a time, whatever that step may be. Again, I'm not going to go into super personal detail about what happened, but it is kind of important that you understand a basic framework of it for the point I'm trying to make here. The reason I had to stop making content in the first place was because I had basically some family emergencies with regards to their health that meant I had to take on some additional responsibilities, and that essentially boiled down to a lot of like physical labor and sort of taking on the responsibility of coordinating some things. I had to do a lot of moving heavy furniture and cleaning, and when I say cleaning, I mean like on my hands and knees scrubbing, fucking hardcore cleaning, because the space I was in charge of cleaning was gross. I won't get in any of the sort of gruesome detail about it, because I'll spare you from that. Just know that it was fucking disgusting, and I did not enjoy it. But ultimately it was necessary, and also I got to reap a benefit from it in that the space I cleaned ended up becoming my new living space. So it was ultimately pretty fulfilling work to do in the long term, but in the moment to moment, when I'm on my knees scrubbing the floor or trying to deep clean a carpet or get a fucking particularly nasty section of the room done, it wasn't great. It wasn't a great experience. It wasn't something I was exactly itching to do. And that started 3 weeks ago. And honestly, it could have taken a lot longer if I didn't sort of employ the main point I want to make during this video, which is the idea of taking things one step at a time. And it was, definitely a daunting thing to start because there were a lot of steps. It would have been easy to get overwhelmed by it, and I did feel overwhelmed by it at many points when I would, finish my my daily tasks or my sort of designated lot for the day in terms of the work I was going to do, and then I would look around and say, okay, I'm not even close to being done yet. I've only just begun to take the steps toward being done. And that can be, definitely be a bit of a disheartening thing to realize when you feel like you've made a lot of progress, but you realize that you're not even close to being finished. Ultimately, the best way to go about something like that, a large-scale project, is to break it down and take it one day at a time. Every day I would wake up, and instead of getting overwhelmed by the amount of decisions I had to make and the amount of things I would have to do in the future, I just focused on what I needed to do right then and there. What I needed to do on that day to continue to prepare myself and to continue to make progress on the ultimate goal. I'm somebody who can definitely get caught up in the mindset of like thinking way too hard about everything, being like 10 steps ahead of myself when it comes to making plans or trying to get things done. I'll be planning for hypotheticals that are branched out from hypotheticals that start from something that I haven't even begun yet. And, that's a type of thinking that I've been prone to my whole life. I know that about myself. So it took a pretty conscious effort on my part to actually just be able to take a step back and say, okay, let's stop focusing on what I'm going to do tomorrow and the next day and the next day, And let me focus on what I'm doing right now, you know, today. Because ultimately what you're gonna be doing in the future is less important than what you're doing right now. I'm quickscoping these fools, man. I forgot about the marksman. They don't want to see me on Cloud City. I think the reason I wanted to play this game is because I've been watching Star Wars Andor as it comes out, season 2, as season 2 airs, and you know, good show. Sorry, I lost my train of thought because I got locked in on sniping people. Basically, the inspiration for this video was that I looked back after these 3 weeks were up and I realized that the only reason I was so successful is because I consciously took it one day at a time. I did what needed to be done on each day, and I didn't try to do more, or I didn't worry myself with trying to plan out super far in advance. I just worried about what needed to get done in that moment, and then put my energy towards doing it, and then figuring out what needed to be done next after the current step was already done. You know, it's like looking at a staircase and worrying about any potential branches in the path that you can't already see, instead of just taking those first steps to the potential branches you're so worried about. It's counterintuitive and counterproductive and stressful. And like, it can be a useful thing, you know, nothing's black and white. It's not like it's always bad to be planning in advance, but it is bad in excess. If all you're doing is planning in advance, then you're never going to actually live in each individual moment. And that'll just lead you to get even more stressed about the future, and then you'll look back and, you know, 3 years will have gone by, and you'll realize you were never really present in any of the moments that were there. Sorry, that sounded like like I was trying to scare you. I'm not. God damn it. And so that was sort of the catalyst for making this video. You know, my own personal experience my own personal experience over the past couple of weeks has really given me a new perspective on the idea of taking things one day at a time. I'm gonna do a different mission. Just kind of taking it day by day really helped me with this situation that could have ultimately been a lot more stressful and taken a lot more time and energy to complete. And so I sort of wanted to impart that wisdom onto you as well. I know it's not exactly a rare or profound piece of wisdom. Take it one day at a time. It's one of the first things they... Holy shit. You know, break it down to the lowest possible denominator you need. Take it one day or 1 hour or 1 minute or 1 second at a time if you have to. Because if you're breaking it down to that small amount of time, then it makes it a lot easier to just act and stop worrying about the actions that you're taking. If you're worried about what the future has in store, try and scale back that time until you're worrying about just the next hour. It makes it a lot easier to do stuff. It makes it a lot easier to, like, want to do things when you're thinking only in terms of those short little bursts, you know, in terms of the present moment. Because ultimately, like, the past is already done, and the future is unclear and uncertain, and you can't control the future. You can influence it, but ultimately the only moment in time you'll ever have direct control over is right now. And that's true forever. But the good news about that is that it means you have free will. You're not beholden to some grand fate written in the stars or whatever. You have free will over this present moment, and you can influence what's going to happen in the future with this present moment. And you can't change the past, but you can learn from it. Use what's happened in the past as guidance for the present moment. And this isn't me saying, like, don't ever think about the consequences of your actions or worry about the future or whatever. Obviously, you should still be thinking about the future when you act now, because you can influence it very, very directly. But the point I'm trying to make is more like, don't let that stress over the future overtake your enjoyment or your, what's the word I'm looking for? Autonomy over the current moment. Because ultimately, the future is undecided, and so, what the hell just happened? So ultimately, if you want to, you know, shape a future for yourself in a specific way, you can. Barring, like, you know, being held back by systemic issues, which is not an uncommon issue for people in the modern world for some reason, even though it doesn't have to be. Ironic that I say this as I'm, you know, playing as the Empire. And these systemic issues sure are bad. Anyways, I'm gonna quick scope this rebel leader. When I was staring down the, like, proverbial storm, it was easy to get overwhelmed in the moment to moment. That's for damn sure. There were definitely moments where I was standing amidst the chaos and, you know, I knew what had to be done, and that ultimately I had to take the first step before I could take the next, but I kind of wanted to be at the top of that staircase already, you know? I'm not a patient man, so it becomes a lot easier for me to actually practice what I preach with regards to taking it one day at a time. But if you find yourself in that situation, just, sort of ask yourself as simply as possible, break it down into the simplest steps you can. Ask yourself, if I want to get to the future I see, or if I want to accomplish this goal, whether that's short-term or long-term, or life goals, or career goals, or personal goals, or fucking fitness, or whatever. This applies to all aspects of life. Look at where you want to be in the future, and ask yourself what the path is to get there, and then put yourself on that path. Take the first step down that path. That is the only way to actually guarantee that you'll be there in the future, is to put yourself on it now. And if you're already on it, if you already see yourself making progress towards the future you want, then staying on that path, taking the next step and the next step, and making sure that you put one foot in front of the other and actually take these steps. It can get easy to get lost in the sauce, I think, when you have a goal you want to accomplish and you're like most of the way there and you're almost at the finish line. I know for me personally, as I was halfway moved into this new space and halfway still in my old one, and sort of slowly reincorporating all of my stuff into this new space, and as I made progress towards it, I got really impatient and frustrated with the whole process. But still, I just had to remind myself that it was one day at a time, and that I just needed to keep doing what I was doing every day to make progress, keep going up one step at a time over and over again until I reached the top. It can be easy to want to just go from A straight to Z, but you gotta go through the rest of the alphabet too, unfortunately. And I know not every part of the alphabet is as fun as LMNOP, but you gotta get through the rest of it if you want to get to Z. Is this analogy falling apart because it's getting too abstract? I can't tell. Life is an infinite process, I will be growing and changing and making progress and trying to, better myself and move forward in my life until the day I die. And I think that's how everybody should live. There should never be long-term planned stagnation built into your life. You should always be willing to and wanting to move forward. And unfortunately, that means making more steps. And I know that sometimes those steps are exhausting and unpleasant. And I know some days you're not going to be actually making any progress up those steps towards the future that you want. And trust me, there were days during the 3 weeks where I kind of just had to look around and say, I'm too exhausted to do any of this. I need to sit here and kind of just recuperate my physical and mental energy. That is also important to be able to recognize. It's all about finding a balance, as is sort of everything in life. It's all about finding the balance between too much and not enough. You can't work too hard, you need to rest, but you can't rest too hard because you need to work. And when I say work, I don't mean in the corporate American sense. I mean in the doing things that are fulfilling to you type of work. Or even if they're not fulfilling, things that are necessary for you to do. Productivity is a modern myth spun by capitalists to get you to feel bad about taking time off. Don't let them make you feel bad about taking time off. Unfortunately, even if you are capable of accomplishing your goal, you still have to actually do it. You have to actually start before you can keep going. Even if the future looks uncertain and you don't really have a plan for the, far future or even the immediate future, look forward. Look forward into smaller and smaller increments of time until you do have a plan. Even if that just means I'm going to stand up and go for a walk right now. That's an actionable plan that you can put into motion right now, and who knows, maybe it'll inspire you to do something else. Maybe you'll figure out what you're going to do after the walk, during the walk, or maybe you won't, and then you'll get home and you'll have to break it down into another, what am I going to do for the next hour? That might not be the most quote-unquote productive way to live, but sometimes it is the way that makes my brain not want to jettison out of my forehead and into a black hole. Take whatever steps you can right now to get yourself moving towards the goals you want to accomplish. If I hadn't just put my head down and done one thing at a time, accomplished each goal as its own individual thing, strive towards the bigger goal, then I wouldn't have just put myself on the path and kept going, and I wouldn't have ended up here, where it's done. Or, knock on wood, it's done. Hold on, I want one more mission. You are your present self, and you have free will, and that's true forever. Worrying so hard about the future or constantly, reminiscing and being nostalgic about the past is completely counterproductive. Real growth only comes when you actually live in the moment. And again, that's not to say that you shouldn't ever think about the future, or you should never look back to the past. Planning for the future and learning from our past are both important parts of being able to take action in the present moment. But it can only get you so far. A plan is nothing until you've actually begun executing on it. You know, you can get a quest marker at the top of a mountain, but you gotta start climbing that mountain, or you're never going to get to the top to begin. You know, if you're looking at a mountain you want to climb, you're not going to get the top. You're never going to get to the top by just thinking, okay, well, I know exactly which path I have to take, and I know exactly which path to avoid because of other people. That's only half the battle. The other half is actually doing it. As much as it may suck. There's a Darkest Dungeon quote I think about sometimes. The narrator says, though unpleasant in the extreme, this work is noble and necessary. And sometimes that's just how I have to frame it to myself, you know, it's unpleasant, but it is necessary. And honestly, even if it is, you know, unpleasant, that's all the more reason to do it now and kind of get it over with. How do I, like, there we go. I also understand that, like, again, systemic issues and sort of the general collapsing democracy around us is a bit worrying and makes it a little difficult to not be anxious about the future. And I say that as a fucking cis white dude. But that sort of ties into the idea of, you know, trying to control what you can and trying not to worry about what you can't. That doesn't mean you shouldn't worry about what's happening. Obviously, if more people were actually worried, then you know, something might be happening to stop it. So if you are feeling like you're, you know, in the pits of despair about it all, and you just don't really see the way out at all, again, what's the way out of the next minute? What's the way out of the next hour, the next day, week? Plan out your next actions in as small increments as possible, as you need to, until you are able to take action. Look at the very first thing I had to do to end up getting the plan in motion. Okay, well, the first thing I have to do is move these things out of the way so that I can begin cleaning. Let me do that. And then taking that first action makes it a lot easier to kind of snowball into the rest. So yeah, that's sort of the gist of what I wanted to say. I hope you're all doing okay recently. I've been really going through it during my break, but I am happy to be back to making videos. I like doing this. It's very fun and fulfilling and enjoyable. Hell, I even kind of got into planning too far in advance with this video. I was thinking about the thumbnail and the title and the fucking, you know, specific things I wanted to talk about before I even hit record. So what's the solution there? It's just say, well, if I want to make this video, what's the first thing I have to do? And that was open a game and start playing and yapping. And so that's what I did. And now, victory! Anyways, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you I imparted some wisdom to you. Yeah, enjoy right now, today, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.